Welcome, dear listeners, to a journey into the heart of adventure and self-discovery. Settle in, get cozy, and let the magic of storytelling whisk you away. If you enjoy this tale, please consider subscribing to our channel for more enchanting narratives, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're listening from. Now, let's begin our story. Midnight Whiskers, Life Beyond the Fence. Midnight was, by all accounts, a lucky cat. His fur, a rich midnight black, was always impeccably groomed, reflecting the soft glow of the living room lamps. His paws, delicate and silent, trod only on plush carpets or the perfectly manicured lawn of his human's garden. His days were a rhythmic tapestry of sunbathing on warm windowsills, chasing the elusive red dot from a laser pointer, and indulging in gourmet salmon pate served in a pristine ceramic bowl. His humans, a kind elderly couple, adored him, showering him with gentle strokes and whispered endearments. Yet, despite this idyllic existence, a profound restlessness stirred within Midnight's feline heart. It wasn't discontent, not precisely, but rather an insatiable curiosity that pulsed beneath his sleek black coat, a longing for something more than the predictable comfort of his gilded cage. This longing had a name, a shape, and a scent, the world beyond the fence. The wooden fence that enclosed his garden was a formidable barrier, tall and unyielding, a symbol of the boundary between his known, safe world and the vast, mysterious unknown. Every evening, as dusk painted the sky in hues of lavender and charcoal, Midnight would position himself atop the shed, his emerald eyes fixed on the distant, shimmering lights of the town. He'd watch the shadows lengthen, listen to the myriad sounds that drifted over the fence, the distant bark of a dog, the chirping symphony of crickets, the rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. These sounds were like whispers, beckoning him, promising secrets and adventures that his pampered life could never offer. He imagined a world where scents were sharper, where every rustle was a potential hunt, every shadow a challenge. He pictured other cats, lean and independent, navigating the labyrinthine alleys and sprawling rooftops, their lives dictated not by the gentle hand of a human, but by the raw, unfiltered rhythm of nature. He saw them as free, truly free, unbound by the invisible strings of affection and routine that, paradoxically, made his own life feel so confined. Sometimes a particularly bold squirrel would dart across the fence, its eyes wide with a wild, untamed energy, and Midnight would feel a surge of primal instinct, a yearning to leap, to chase, to truly live. But then a soft voice would call his name, a bowl of fresh food would clink, and the moment would pass, leaving him with a bittersweet pang of unfulfilled desire. He was a creature of comfort, yes, but also a creature of instinct and the wild. Untamed part of him was growing louder with each passing day. The fence, once a symbol of protection, was slowly transforming into a symbol of confinement, a challenge to be overcome. He knew, deep in his whiskers, that his destiny lay not within the manicured confines of his garden, but somewhere out there, under the vast, stardusted canopy of the world beyond the fence. The world beyond the fence was an enigma, a canvas painted with untold adventures and Midnight's vivid imagination. He would often find himself perched atop the garden shed, a vantage point from which he could gaze over the top of the wooden barrier, though the view was largely obscured by the dense foliage of the neighbor's overgrown hedge. Still, even these fleeting glimpses, mere suggestions of what lay beyond, fueled his burgeoning wanderlust. He saw the tops of taller trees, their branches swaying with a different rhythm than the familiar apple tree in Mrs. Gable's orchard. He saw a sliver of distant terracotta roofline, not the cozy gray tiles of his own home. The scents were perhaps even more potent than the sights. A symphony of unfamiliar aromas wafted over the fence, each note a tantalizing hint of the wild. There was the sharp, metallic tang of rain-soaked asphalt, the earthy musk of damp leaves from an unkempt patch of woodland, and most intriguing of all, the faint, elusive scent of other animals, not the domesticated, well-fed scent of the neighbor's pampered poodle, but something wilder, more primal. Sometimes a particularly strong gust of wind would carry the sweet, decaying smell of fallen fruit from an unmanaged orchard, or the faint, smoky scent of a distant bonfire. Each new aroma was a chapter in a book Midnight was desperate to read. Midnight's human family, Mrs. Gable and her visiting niece, Eleanor, remained blissfully unaware of the burgeoning wanderlust in their cherished feline companion. To them, Midnight was the epitome of contentment, a purring, needing bundle of affection who demanded head scratches and offered soft chirps in return. They interpreted his long hours by the fence as an appreciation for the garden's tranquility, or perhaps a diligent watch for an errant squirrel. They would often call his name. The decision, when it finally came, was not a sudden impulse, but the culmination of weeks of restless observation of every twitching whisker and every deep inhale of unfamiliar air. One particularly moonless night, the air heavy with the scent of impending rain and the distant, tantalizing promise of adventure, Midnight found himself once again at the foot of the fence. This time, however, his usual contemplative gaze was replaced by a determined glint in his emerald eyes. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. The call had become an undeniable roar within his heart. He eyed the weathered planks, noting the rough texture, the slight give in a loose board near the top. He measured the distance with an instinct born of generations of wild ancestors, a silent calculation honed by countless playful pounces and graceful leaps within the garden. With a low crouch, muscles coiling like springs beneath his sleek black fur, he launched himself upwards. His claws, usually reserved for the scratching post or the occasional unfortunate armchair, found purchase in the rough wood. He scrabbled, pulling himself higher, his powerful hind legs propelling him upwards with surprising strength. A moment of precarious balance, a flicker of fear as he teetered on the narrow top of the fence, the world seeming to sway beneath him. Then, with a final, decisive push, he was over. He landed with a soft thud on the other side, rolling slightly to absorb the impact, a motion as fluid as liquid shadow. For a moment, he lay still, heart pounding a rapid drum against his ribs, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He was out, truly out. The familiar garden, with its comforting scents and predictable sounds, was now behind him, an invisible barrier separating him from his former life. The air on this side of the fence was different. Cooler, perhaps, and definitely wilder. The scent of damp earth was more pronounced, mingled with the sharp, resinous smell of pine needles. And something else, something animalistic and untamed. The ground beneath his paws was not the soft, cultivated soil of Mrs. Gable's flower beds, nor the smooth, cool patio stones, but a tangle of rough grass and unseen roots, uneven and mysterious. The sounds, too, were a new symphony. The gentle rustle of leaves in the garden was replaced by the deeper, more resonant sigh of a dense thicket of trees just beyond the fence. The chirping of crickets here seemed louder, more insistent, and he could hear the distinct, quick patter of tiny feet somewhere in the undergrowth, not the familiar mouse from Mrs. Gable's shed, but something entirely new. A shiver, not of fear, but of pure, exhilarating wonder, ran down his spine. The moon, a slender crescent tonight, cast long, dancing shadows, turning the familiar world into a landscape of dark mysteries. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every rustle of leaves a hidden creature. Midnight's senses, usually dulled by the predictability of his garden life, were now acutely alive, tingling with an almost overwhelming surge of new information. He took a tentative step, then another, his whiskers twitching, his ears swiveling, absorbing every detail. This was it. The great leap had been made, and the world beyond the fence was finally, gloriously, his to explore. The thrill of freedom was intoxicating, a potent elixir that banished all lingering doubts. He was no longer just Mrs. Gable's pampered cat. He was an adventurer, a pioneer in a world he had only dreamt of until now. The first few hours beyond the fence were a blur of heightened senses and exhilarating caution for midnight. Each step was a discovery, each breath a new experience. The world here was not neatly trimmed and predictable like Mrs. Gable's garden. It was a wild, sprawling tapestry of textures and forms. He navigated through tall, reedy grasses that tickled his belly, their tips brushing against his chin, carrying the fresh, dewy scent of the night. His paws sank into soft, damp earth, then crunched over dry, fallen leaves, each sound a revelation. The ground undulated, rising and falling in gentle slopes he hadn't known existed. He kept low, his sleek black fur a perfect camouflage in the moon-dappled shadows. His emerald eyes, usually soft and sleepy, were now wide and alert, scanning every flickering shadow, every rustling branch. The sheer vastness of this new territory was overwhelming. The garden, which had once felt like a boundless kingdom, now seemed no more than a small, cozy room. Here the horizon stretched further, disappearing into the dark, whispering woods that beckoned with both promise and peril. The sounds of the night were a constant, immersive soundtrack. The rhythmic chirping of crickets was joined by the deeper croak of frogs from a nearby, unseen pond. The hoot of an owl echoed through the stillness, a haunting, majestic sound that made Midnight's fur prickle with a primal awareness. He heard the faint, distant bark of a dog, far more aggressive than the neighbor's poodle, a sound that sent a jolt of instinctual fear through him, reminding him that this new world held dangers as well as wonders. As he crept deeper, an unexpected encounter broke the silent, solitary exploration. A tiny brown blur darted across his path, freezing abruptly just a few feet away. It was a field mouse, larger and more robust than the plump, slow-moving mice he occasionally encountered in Mrs. Gable's pantry. Its eyes, tiny beads of obsidian, stared back at Midnight with a mixture of terror and defiance. Midnight, for his part, felt a jolt of surprise. In the garden, a mouse was a toy, a fleeting chase, rarely a meal. Here in the wild, the interaction felt different. There was a raw, ancient tension in the air, a silent acknowledgement of predator and prey. His hunting instincts, long dormant under the regime of salmon pate, stirred within him. His body tensed, a slow, deliberate lowering of his posture, ready to pounce. But then, something held him back. Perhaps it was the sheer novelty of the situation, or the overwhelming sensory input of this new world. He watched the mouse, mesmerized by its trembling whiskers, its rapid breathing. He saw the pure, unadulterated fear in its tiny form. And in that moment, the impulse to hunt, while present, was momentarily overridden by a profound sense of observation. He was an observer, a newcomer, not yet fully a participant in this intricate dance of life and death. After a long, silent standoff, the mouse, sensing a momentary reprieve, darted away with astonishing speed, disappearing into the safety of a thicket. Midnight watched it go, a strange mix of satisfaction and unfulfilled instinct swirling within him. He hadn't pounced, hadn't chased, hadn't killed. This was a new kind of interaction, one that spoke of a different order, a different set of rules. He realized then that his journey beyond the fence was not just about exploration, but about transformation. He was learning, adapting, and slowly, surely becoming something more than just Mrs. Gable's pampered pet. The wild was beginning to claim him, one shadow, one whisper, one encounter at a time. Midnight continued his nocturnal exploration, guided by an invisible current of curiosity and the subtle shifts in the landscape. The dense undergrowth eventually gave way to a more open, though still wild area. He found himself on the fringes of what appeared to be a residential neighborhood, the faint glow of streetlights painting the edges of the darkness. The air here was different again, carrying the faint, sweet scent of garbage bins, the metallic tang of parked cars, and the distant, muffled hum of human activity. He moved cautiously, a black shadow hugging the walls and fences that now replaced the natural thickets. He peeked around a corner, his head low, whiskers twitching, and then he saw it, the alleyway. It wasn't a grand, sweeping thoroughfare, but a narrow, utilitarian passage nestled between the backs of a row of old brick buildings. It was a place of forgotten corners and discarded treasures, a liminal space that pulsed with a quiet, vibrant energy of its own. Overhead, a single flickering fluorescent light cast a sickly yellow glow, struggling against the pervasive darkness. The alley was a symphony of smells: stale food, damp cardboard, the sharp ammonia scent of cat urine, and something else, a rich, complex aroma that spoke of many lives intertwined. And then he saw them, cats. More cats than he had ever seen in one place. Certainly more than the occasional stray that Mrs. Gable would shoo away from her bird feeder. They were everywhere. Some lounged languidly atop overflowing dumpsters, their eyes half closed in a state of relaxed vigilance. Others prowled with an air of practiced nonchalance, their movements economical and purposeful. A small group huddled near a dented metal bin, sharing a scavenged morsel. They were a motley crew, a patchwork quilt of breeds and colors. A scruffy, ginger tomcat with one torn ear surveyed his domain from a precarious perch on a rickety fire escape. A sleek, almost regal-looking Siamese with striking blue eyes moved with an elegant grace, her tail held high. A fluffy gray tabby, round and seemingly content, groomed herself with meticulous care in a sheltered doorway. There were lean, sinewy black cats, mottled calicos, and even a small, timid white kitten peeking out from beneath a discarded pallet. Midnight remained hidden, pressed against the cool brick of a building, his body almost invisible in the deep shadows. He watched them, fascinated. Their movements were different from his own, imbued with a certain streetwise confidence, a resilience born of necessity. Their interactions were a complex dance of subtle glances, territorial posturing, and occasional, surprisingly gentle nudges. He heard their low growls, their soft chirps, their almost imperceptible hisses, a language he instinctively understood, yet had never truly needed to speak. He felt a strange mixture of awe and intimidation. These were not pampered pets like himself. These were survivors, creatures forged in the crucible of the streets. They seemed to possess a knowledge, a shared history, that was entirely alien to his sheltered existence. He saw the scars on some, the nicks in their ears, the wary glint in their eyes, badges of honor in this unforgiving world. Yet there was also a powerful sense of community, an unspoken bond that tied them together. They moved as a collective, even in their individual pursuits. Midnight, who had always been the sole feline monarch of his garden, felt a pang of something akin to loneliness, quickly followed by a yearning to understand this new, complex society. The alleyway, initially a place of mere observation, was slowly drawing him in, promising a world of challenges and perhaps belonging. He knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within his bones, that his journey had just truly begun. The fence was far behind him, and the vibrant, untamed heart of the city's feline underworld lay before him, waiting. Midnight remained a silent observer for what felt like an eternity, though it was likely only an hour or two. He studied the rhythm of the alley, the ebb and flow of its feline inhabitants. He noted who was dominant, who was timid, who shared, and who hoarded. He was a sponge, soaking in every nuance of this complex, unwritten social code. His hunger, a dull ache he had ignored since leaving Mrs. Gable's, began to sharpen, reminding him of the practicalities of his new existence. It was the ginger tomcat, the one with the torn ear, who first noticed him. Rusty, as Midnight would later learn, possessed an uncanny knack for spotting newcomers, a sixth sense honed by years of survival. Rusty had been lounging on a particularly inviting cardboard box, ostensibly asleep, but one wary eye had been open, tracking Midnight's almost imperceptible movements. Slowly, deliberately, Rusty uncoiled himself from his makeshift bed. He was a sturdy, muscular cat, his ginger fur matted in places, his whiskers battle-scarred. He moved with a confident swagger, his tail held low but steady, a clear signal of his non-aggressive intent, yet also a subtle warning. He approached Midnight's hiding spot, his steps soft and measured, stopping a few feet away. Midnight tense, ready to bolt, but some instinct told him to stay. He held his ground, his emerald eyes locked with Rusty's amber gaze. There was no hostility in Rusty's eyes, only a weary curiosity, a lifetime of seeing it all reflected back. Rusty let out a low, rumbling sound, not quite a growl, not quite a purr, but something in between a gruff greeting. "Well, look what the alley dragged in," he rasped, his voice gravelly, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "Lost, are we, or just admiring the scenery?" Midnight blinked, surprised by the direct address. He hadn't anticipated being spoken to, let alone so casually. He found his voice a small, almost apologetic meow. Rusty chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "A talker, are you? Good. Better than the silent types. They usually mean trouble." He took another step closer, sniffing the air around Midnight. "You smell clean, like soap and fancy food." "Not exactly alley cat aroma, is it?" Midnight instinctively flinched at the observation, his pampered past laid bare. He half expected Rusty to scoff, to dismiss him as a weakling. Instead, Rusty simply settled onto his haunches, his gaze unwavering. "First time out, huh? The fence got boring, did it?" Midnight, finding a surprising comfort in Rusty's gruff honesty, nodded almost imperceptibly. Rusty sighed, a puff of warm air. "Happens to the best of us. This world's a bit bigger than a rose garden, ain't it? More interesting, too, if you know where to look. And where not to." He paused, then gestured with a flick of his head towards a discarded pizza box near a dumpster. "Hungry, I imagine. You won't find salmon paid out here, but there's usually a crust or two. Come on, don't be shy. No one bites unless you ask them to." Midnight hesitated for a moment longer, then slowly, tentatively, he emerged from the shadows. The other cats, who had been observing the interaction from a distance, now returned to their previous activities, seemingly satisfied that the newcomer wasn't a threat. Rusty, his unexpected ally, had offered him not just food, but an invitation, a bridge into this new, daunting world. A sense of relief, profound and unexpected, washed over Midnight. He had found a guide, a gruff, street-hardened mentor who might just show him how to survive, and perhaps even thrive beyond the fence. Rusty proved to be an invaluable, albeit gruff, mentor. His lessons began immediately, practical and unsentimental. "First rule of the alley," Rusty declared, nudging a suspicious-looking bread crust towards Midnight with his nose. "If it ain't moving, and it don't smell rotten enough to make your whiskers curl, it's probably edible." Probably. Midnight, accustomed to gourmet meals served in pristine bowls, eyed the crust with a mix of disdain and genuine hunger. He took a tentative bite, surprised to find it wasn't as terrible as he'd imagined. It was sustenance, pure and simple, and in this new world, sustenance was paramount. Next came the art of finding water. Rusty led him to a leaky drain pipe, where a slow, steady drip formed a small puddle in a cracked paving slab. "Cleanest water you'll find," he explained. "Unless it rains, then you drink from puddles. Never trust a bowl left out by a human, unless you know the human. And even then, be wary." Midnight drank deeply, the cool water a welcome balm to his parched throat. He realized how much he'd taken for granted, the constantly refreshed water bowl, the endless supply of kibble. The lessons continued through the night, a crash course in street survival. Rusty taught him how to read the subtle signs of human presence, the opening of a door, the distant rumble of an engine, the telltale scent of a dog walker approaching. Humans are mostly harmless, Rusty advised, but they're unpredictable. Some mean well, some mean ill, most just don't care. Best to keep your distance unless you're starving and they're offering something good. Even then, be ready to bolt. Midnight learned the best places to hide, beneath parked cars, behind overflowing bins and the dense shadows of overgrown bushes. He learned to distinguish the rustle of a harmless rat from the heavier tread of a dog, the distant siren of an ambulance from the closer, more ominous wail of a police car. Every sound, every scent, every movement now held a new significance, a potential warning or opportunity. The contrast with his pampered past was stark, almost comical. Just yesterday, his biggest concern was whether Mrs. Gable would remember to open the conservatory door for his afternoon nap. Today, he was learning the difference between a safe alley and a dangerous street, between a fresh scrap and a spoiled one. His claws, once used for playful swatting, were now tools for climbing and defense. His sleek black fur, once a mark of beauty, was now a cloak of invisibility. Rusty, despite his gruff exterior, was patient. He corrected Midnight with a gentle nudge of his head, or a low, warning growl. "Too slow, newbie. You gotta be quicker than that," he'd grumble when Midnight hesitated. "Think with your paws, not just your whiskers." Midnight absorbed it all, his mind racing, adapting with a speed he hadn't known he possessed. He felt a primal part of himself awakening, a sharp, keen edge that had been dulled by years of domesticity. The street cats, initially wary, began to accept him. They saw him with Rusty, a sign of endorsement. A few offered a nod, a brief sniff, a silent acknowledgement of his presence. He was no longer just the clean-smelling newcomer. He was Rusty's protégé, a potential member of their loose-knit community. As dawn approached, painting the sky with streaks of bruised purple and pale orange, Midnight felt a weariness deep in his bones. But it was a satisfying weariness, born of exertion and learning. He was tired, hungry, and a little bruised, but he was also alive, truly alive, in a way he had never been before. The world beyond the fence was demanding, but it was also exhilarating, and he was beginning to find his place within its wild embrace. Under the sheltering branches of the old oak, Midnight quickly discovered that the street cat community was a vibrant, living tapestry woven with countless individual stories. The cats, once strangers, now began to reveal their histories, their triumphs, and their close calls. Midnight, still largely an observer, listened intently, soaking in every detail, every nuance of their lives beyond the fence. Old Man Tiber, perched on a low, moss-covered branch, was a natural storyteller. His voice, a soft, raspy murmur, would often draw a small circle of listeners. He spoke of the old days before the alley was quite so bustling, when the city was quieter and the territories larger. He told tales of legendary hunts, of outwitting cunning foxes, and of surviving particularly harsh winters by finding shelter in forgotten cellars. His stories were rich with lessons disguised as anecdotes about patience, cunning, and the importance of knowing your environment. Luna, with her piercing blue eyes, shared stories of her incredible hunting prowess. She described the thrill of tracking a plump rat through a labyrinth of pipes, the silent, deadly pounce, the satisfaction of a successful chase. Her tales were not boastful, but factual, delivered with a quiet confidence that inspired respect. Midnight learned about the best hunting grounds, the times of day when prey was most active, and the subtle art of camouflage in an urban environment. He realized that hunting here was not a game, but a crucial skill, a matter of survival. Patches, the calico, was the comedian of the group, her stories often punctuated by playful swats and exaggerated meows. She recounted hilarious misadventures involving inquisitive dogs, clumsy humans, and elaborate schemes to steal unattended picnic lunches. Her tales brought laughter and lightness to their often hard lives. reminding them that even in the wild, there was room for joy and mischief. Domino, the stoic black and white Tom, was a cat of few words, but when he spoke, his observations were sharp and insightful. He often spoke of the ever-changing nature of human neighborhoods, how new buildings sprung up, altering territories, and how some humans were safer than others. He taught Midnight about the subtle art of reading human body language, of distinguishing a kind hand from a threatening foot. Midnight, for his part, contributed little to the storytelling, content to be a rapt audience. He found himself utterly captivated by these narratives of resilience and resourcefulness. He compared their experiences to his own sheltered life. In Mrs. Gable's garden, his biggest challenge had been deciding which sunbeam offered the optimal warmth. Here, these cats faced real dangers, real hunger, real battles for survival, and yet they carried themselves with a dignity and a sense of purpose he had never witnessed. He began to feel a profound shift within himself. The pangs of homesickness, which had occasionally surfaced, began to recede, replaced by a growing sense of belonging to this new, unconventional family. He wasn't just an escapee from a pampered life. He was becoming part of something larger, something ancient and enduring. He was learning not just how to survive, but why they survived for each other, for the freedom of the open sky, for the thrill of the hunt, and for the simple, unadorned truth of their wild existence. The city, once a daunting maze, now felt like a vast classroom, and the cats of the old oak were his patient, wise teachers. Life beyond the fence, while exhilarating, was also punctuated by moments of stark, terrifying reality. Midnight was about to learn just how quickly danger could materialize in this untamed world. It happened during one of his solo patrols, a short distance from the old oak, as he was exploring a new alleyway he'd spotted. The air was thick with the scent of discarded food, and his stomach rumbled in anticipation. He was intently focused on a half-eaten sandwich near an overflowing bin, his hunting instincts honed sharper by days of scavenging. His ears were swiveling, but perhaps not quite fast enough. A sudden, jarring bark, loud and aggressive, ripped through the air, sending a jolt of pure terror through his sleek body. Before he could even fully register the sound, a blur of fur and teeth erupted from behind a parked car. It was a dog, a large, powerful Rottweiler, off its leash, its eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. Its growl was a deep, guttural rumble that vibrated through the ground. Midnight reacted on pure instinct. He darted, a black streak against the grime of the alley, his heart pounding like a drum against his ribs. The dog was fast, surprisingly fast, its heavy paws thudding close behind him. He scrambled over a low wall, claws scrabbling for purchase, feeling the hot breath of the dog on his tail. He heard a snarl, a frustrated bark as the dog's snout slammed against the wall, unable to follow. He didn't stop. He sprinted, weaving through a series of narrow gaps and beneath garden fences, his lungs burning, the image of those snapping jaws seared into his mind. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get away to find safety. The adrenaline was a potent, bitter taste in his mouth. He finally collapsed, panting and trembling, in a dense thicket of blackberry bushes, his first snagging on thorns, but the pain was a welcome distraction from the fear. He lay there, hidden and still, listening, his ears strained for any sound of pursuit. The alley, which had moments before seemed a place of opportunity, now felt like a death trap. Just as his breathing began to steady, a familiar scent drifted towards him, Rusty. The ginger tomcat appeared silently at the edge of the thicket, his eyes scanning the area. He saw Midnight, huddled and shaking, and let out a soft, reassuring trill. "Easy, newbie," he rumbled, his voice unusually gentle. "Rough encounter, eh? Thought I heard a commotion." Midnight could only manage a shaky meow in response. Rusty nudged his head against Midnight's flank. "You did good. You ran. That's the most important lesson. Don't stand your ground unless you have no other choice. A smart cat lives to fight another day. He licked Midnight's head once, a rare gesture of affection. Come on, let's get you back to the old oak. The others will want to know you're safe. As they made their way back, Midnight felt a renewed sense of gratitude for Rusty and for the entire community. He realized that while he had learned to navigate this world, he was not alone in it. These were his allies, his protectors, his family. The close call had been a brutal reminder of the dangers, but it had also solidified his bond with the street cats. He was no longer just an individual adventurer. He was part of a collective, a resilient unit. The memory of the dog's snarl would linger, a stark lesson etched into his memory. But so too would the comforting presence of Rusty, the unexpected ally who had shown him the true meaning of kinship beyond the fence. Having narrowly escaped the jaws of the Rottweiler, Midnight found his perception of the world, particularly of humans, profoundly altered. In Mrs. Gable's garden, humans were benevolent giants, providers of food, warmth, and gentle scratches. Their presence was a comfort, a guarantee of safety. Beyond the fence, however, the human touch was a far more complex and often unpredictable phenomenon. Rusty and the other cats had offered a nuanced perspective on humans. They're like the weather, Old Man Tiber had once mused, his eyes half closed. Sometimes sunny and warm, sometimes cold and stormy, and often just indifferent. You learn to read the clouds. Midnight now understood the wisdom in that observation. He began to observe humans with a detached, almost scientific curiosity. He saw the young mother pushing a prong, her face alight with a gentle smile as she cooed at her baby. He saw the hurried businessman, his face a mask of stress, rushing past without a glance. He saw the teenager engrossed in a small glowing screen, oblivious to the world around him. Each human was a distinct entity, a potential source of either kindness or danger, or, most often, simply a moving obstacle. Midnight learned to recognize the signs of a safe human, the gentle, slow movements, the soft voices, the way they might leave a small bowl of water out on a hot day. These were the ones who meant no harm, perhaps even offered a stray pat, which Midnight, still wary, usually avoided. He watched as Luna, ever the pragmatist, would occasionally allow a kind old woman to stroke her head, receiving a small offering of tuna in return. He noticed how Luna would always keep one eye on the woman's hand, ready to dart away at the slightest hint of aggression. Conversely, he learned to identify the dangerous humans, the ones who moved with sudden jerky motions, whose voices were loud and harsh, or who deliberately tried to shoo them away with kicks or thrown objects. He saw the casual cruelty, the thoughtless disregard, the outright hostility that some humans harbored towards the street cats. These were the ones to avoid at all costs, their scent a warning, their presence a signal to disappear into the shadows. One evening, he witnessed a small, heartbreaking scene. A young boy, no older than Eleanor, was gently trying to coax a tiny, starving kitten out from beneath a car, offering a piece of ham. The kitten was terrified, hissing and spitting. The boy's face was etched with genuine concern, his voice soft and pleading. Midnight watched from a distance, a strange ache in his chest. He saw the innocence, the pure, unadulterated kindness in the boy's actions, a stark contrast to the indifferent hustle of the city. He remembered Eleanor's gentle hands, her soft laughter as she played with him in the garden. The experience was a profound re-education. Humans were not monolithic. They were a spectrum of intentions, a complex blend of good and bad, kindness and cruelty. His old, simplistic view of them as solely benevolent providers was shattered, replaced by a more nuanced, realistic understanding. He learned to trust his instincts, to read the subtle cues, to make split-second judgments about who to approach and who to avoid. The human touch, once a guaranteed source of comfort, was now a potential gamble, a variable in the intricate equation of survival. Midnight carried these lessons not with bitterness, but with a newfound wisdom. He understood that in this wild, unpredictable world, every interaction, whether with a fellow cat or a towering human, held both promise and peril, and it was up to him to navigate that delicate balance with caution and an ever-sharpening awareness. His education beyond the fence was continuous, relentless, and utterly transformative. Despite the relentless pace of street life and the constant demand for vigilance, there were moments when the past, like a phantom limb, would assert its presence. Midnight, now leaner and more agile, his fur a little rougher from the elements, would occasionally catch a scent, a sound, or a fleeting image that would transport him back to the comforting, predictable world of Mrs. Gable's garden. One crisp autumn afternoon, as he was making his way through a residential street, keeping to the shadows of a row of well-maintained hedges, a familiar aroma wafted towards him. It was the distinct sweet smell of lavender, mingled with the faint, warm scent of freshly baked shortbread. His whiskers twitched, his ears swiveled, and his steps faltered. It was the scent of Mrs. Gable's garden, the very essence of his old home. He paused, his body tensing, his mind momentarily disoriented. For a fleeting second, he was no longer the streetwise Midnight, but the pampered house cat, dreaming of salmon pay and sunbeams. He imagined Mrs. Gable, humming softly as she tended her roses, or Eleanor, giggling as she chased butterflies across the lawn. The image was so vivid, so potent, that a pang of homesickness, sharp and unexpected, pierced through his newfound resilience. He found himself drawn, almost against his will, towards the source of the scent. He crept closer, peeking through a gap in a neatly trimmed hedge. And there it was, not his garden, but a remarkably similar one. A small, neatly kept patch of green, bordered by a white picket fence, a bird bath gleaming in the afternoon sun, and a profusion of purple lavender bushes. It was a mirror image, a ghostly echo of his former life. He saw a woman, older, with silver hair, tending to the flower beds. She wasn't Mrs. Gable, but her movements, her gentle demeanor were uncannily similar. He watched as she bent to deadhead a rose, her hand moving with a familiar grace. A small, fluffy white cat, utterly content, lay curled on a sun-drenched patio chair, occasionally twitching an ear as a bird chirped nearby. Midnight watched the scene unfold, a silent observer from the shadows. He saw the utter peace, the absolute security, the unburdened contentment of the white cat. There was no vigilance needed here, no constant scanning for danger, no gnawing hunger. It was a life of pure, unadulterated comfort. For a long moment, the allure of that life was almost overwhelming. The thought of soft blankets, endless food, and warm laps was a powerful siren song. He remembered the simple joy of chasing a toy mouse across a polished wooden floor, the satisfying crunch of premium kibble, the bliss of a long, uninterrupted nap. A part of him yearned for that ease, that effortless existence. But then another memory surfaced. The thrill of scaling the fence, the exhilarating fear of the dog chase, the camaraderie of the old oak cats, the sharp taste of freedom. He remembered Rusty's gruff wisdom, Luna's quiet strength, old man Tiber's knowing gaze. He remembered the feeling of his own strength, his own cunning, his own resilience. He looked at the white cat on the patio chair, so safe, so sheltered, and suddenly that life, while tempting, felt a little small. He had seen the vastness of the world, tasted its dangers and its freedoms. He had forged a new identity, a new purpose. The pang of homesickness, though still present, receded, replaced by a quiet resolve. He was no longer that pampered cat. He was Midnight, the street cat. He took one last, lingering sniff of the lavender and shortbread, a silent farewell to a life he had outgrown. Then, with a quiet rustle, he melted back into the shadows, the whispers of his past fading, replaced by the insistent, vibrant hum of his wild, chosen present. His journey was forward, always forward, beyond any fence, real or imagined. Despite the relentless pace of street life and the constant demand for vigilance, there were moments when the past, like a phantom limb, would assert its presence. Midnight, now leaner and more agile, his fur a little rougher from the elements, would occasionally catch a scent, a sound, or a fleeting image that would transport him back to the comforting, predictable world of Mrs. Gable's garden. One crisp autumn afternoon, as he was making his way through a residential street, keeping to the shadows of a row of well-maintained hedges, a familiar aroma wafted towards him. It was the distinct sweet smell of lavender, mingled with the faint warm scent of freshly baked shortbread. His whiskers twitched, his ears swiveled, and his steps faltered. It was the scent of Mrs. Gable's garden, the very essence of his old home. He paused, his body tensing, his mind momentarily disoriented. For a fleeting second, he was no longer the streetwise Midnight, but the pampered house cat, dreaming of salmon pay and sunbeams. He imagined Mrs. Gable, humming softly as she tended her roses, or Eleanor, giggling as she chased butterflies across the lawn. The image was so vivid, so potent, that a pang of homesickness, sharp and unexpected, pierced through his newfound resilience. He found himself drawn, almost against his will, towards the source of the scent. He crept closer, peeking through a gap in a neatly trimmed hedge. And there it was, not his garden, but a remarkably similar one. A small, neatly kept patch of green, bordered by a white picket fence, a bird bath gleaming in the afternoon sun, and a profusion of purple lavender bushes. It was a mirror image, a ghostly echo of his former life. He saw a woman, older, with silver hair, tending to the flower beds. She wasn't Mrs. Gable, but her movements, her gentle demeanor were uncannily similar. He watched as she bent to deadhead a rose, her hand moving with a familiar grace. A small, fluffy white cat, utterly content, lay curled on a sun-drenched patio chair, occasionally twitching an ear as a bird chirped nearby. Midnight watched the scene unfold, a silent observer from the shadows. He saw the utter peace, the absolute security, the unburdened contentment of the white cat. There was no vigilance needed here, no constant scanning for danger, no gnawing hunger. It was a life of pure, unadulterated comfort. For a long moment, the allure of that life was almost overwhelming. The thought of soft blankets, endless food, and warm laps was a powerful siren song. He remembered the simple joy of chasing a toy mouse across a polished wooden floor, the satisfying crunch of premium kibble, the bliss of a long, uninterrupted nap. A part of him yearned for that ease, that effortless existence. But then another memory surfaced, the thrill of scaling the fence, the exhilarating fear of the dog chase, the camaraderie of the old oak cats, the sharp taste of freedom. He remembered Rusty's gruff wisdom, Luna's quiet strength, Old Man Tiber's knowing gaze. He remembered the feeling of his own strength, his own cunning, his own resilience. He looked at the white cat on the patio chair, so safe, so sheltered, and suddenly that life, while tempting, felt a little small. He had seen the vastness of the world, tasted its dangers and its freedoms. He had forged a new identity, a new purpose. The pang of homesickness, though still present, receded, replaced by a quiet resolve. He was no longer that pampered cat. He was Midnight, the street cat. He took one last, lingering sniff of the lavender and shortbread, a silent farewell to a life he had outgrown. Then, with a quiet rustle, he melted back into the shadows, the whispers of his past fading, replaced by the insistent, vibrant hum of his wild, chosen present. His journey was forward, always forward, beyond any fence, real or imagined. The vibrant greens of summer had long faded, replaced by the muted golds and fiery reds of autumn. Now, a new chill had begun to creep into the air, a biting promise of the season to come. The days grew shorter, the nights longer, and far colder. The street cats, seasoned by countless cycles of the seasons, felt the change deep in their bones. Winter was approaching, and with it, new challenges. Food became scarcer. The plump field mice and unsuspecting birds of summer had either burrowed deep or migrated south. The overflowing garbage bins, once a reliable source of discarded morsels, were now emptier, the leftovers frozen solid. Every scrap, every crumb, became a precious commodity, fought over with increasing ferocity. Midnight, though hardened by his time on the streets, felt the sting of the cold more acutely than he had anticipated. His sleek black fur, while beautiful, offered little insulation against the biting winds that whistled through the alleys. He found himself constantly seeking out sheltered nooks beneath parked cars, inside disused cardboard boxes, or huddled close to the warm exhaust vents of restaurants. The cats of the old oak became even more reliant on each other. The communal hunts, already essential, grew more frequent and more desperate. They pooled their meager resources, sharing what little they found, a silent pact of survival against the encroaching cold. Luna's hunting prowess became even more crucial, her ability to track even the most elusive prey a lifeline for the community. Old Man Tiber, with his years of experience, shared wisdom on conserving energy and finding the warmest, most protected spots. Rusty, ever the pragmatist, became more vigilant. "Winter ain't for the faint of heart, newbie," he'd grumble, his breath misting in the cold air. "You gotta be smarter, faster, and tougher than ever. Find shelter, stay warm, and don't waste a single calorie." The need for adequate shelter became paramount. The old oak, while a spiritual anchor, offered little protection against the icy winds and driving rain that now began to lash the city. The cats would huddle together, their combined body heat offering a small measure of warmth, but it was not enough. They needed something more substantial, a true refuge from the unforgiving elements. One particularly harsh night, a sudden sharp sleet began to fall, turning the alleyways into treacherous, icy paths. Midnight, huddled miserably beneath a flimsy tarp, shivered uncontrollably. He remembered the warmth of Mrs. Gable's fireplace, the soft, thick rug, the heavy velvet curtains that kept out the cold. The memory was a cruel taunt, a reminder of the comfort he had willingly forsaken. But this time, the pang of homesickness was different. It wasn't a longing to return, but a stark realization of the sacrifices he had made, the true cost of his freedom. He chose this life, and now he had to endure its hardships. He looked at the other cats, their eyes gleaming in the dim light, their forms huddled together for warmth. There was no complaint, no regret, only a grim determination to survive. The approaching winter forged an even deeper bond among them. They were a family, not by blood, but by shared struggle, by the unspoken promise to face the harshness of the world together. The search for a proper winter haven became their collective mission, a race against time before the full fury of winter descended upon them. Midnight, shivering but resolute, knew that his journey beyond the fence was entering its most challenging chapter yet, and he was ready to face it with his newfound family by his side. They moved in, establishing their territories within its crumbling walls, finding the warmest spots and even managing to scavenge some old rags and newspapers to create makeshift beds. A sense of shared purpose and tentative security settled over the community. However, their newfound sanctuary was not destined to remain undisputed. One bitter, snow-laden evening, as the cats huddled together, a sudden, aggressive snarl echoed from the entrance. A rival group of street cats, larger and more brutish, had discovered their refuge. Led by a scarred, brawny tomcat named Brutus, they were known for their territorial aggression and their willingness to fight for resources. Rusty, always the first to confront a threat, bristled, his fur standing on end. "Brutus," he growled, his voice low and dangerous, "this territory's taken. Find your own shelter? Brutus merely sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. Looks empty enough to me, old-timer, and a lot warmer than the alley. He lunged forward, a clear challenge. A fierce skirmish erupted. Rusty, though experience, was growing older, and Brutus was younger, stronger, fueled by aggression. Luna, Patches, and Domino joined the fray, their claws flashing, their snarls echoing through the dusty rooms. Midnight, initially caught off guard, found himself at a crossroads. His instincts screamed for him to hide, to avoid the conflict, as he would have done in his old life. But something had changed within him. He looked at Rusty, struggling against Brutus's relentless assault. He saw Luna, defending a young kitten with fierce determination. He felt the collective fear, but also the unwavering resolve of his new family. A surge of protective anger, hot and unexpected, coursed through him. He wasn't just defending a shelter. He was defending his shelter, his community, his chosen family. With a guttural cry, unlike any sound he had ever made before, Midnight launched himself into the fray. He didn't target Brutus directly, but instead, with a flash of cunning he hadn't known he possessed, he attacked one of Brutus's largest enforcers, a hulking gray tomcat who was attempting to flank Luna. Midnight's attack was swift, precise, and entirely unexpected. He went for the legs, a low, unexpected lunge that knocked the larger cat off balance. He followed up with a series of quick, stinging swipes, targeting the eyes and ears, avoiding a direct confrontation of strength. The gray tomcat, surprised and disoriented, yowled in pain and backed away. His unexpected bravery and cunning turned the tide. Brutus, momentarily distracted by the chaos among his own ranks, found Rusty pressing his advantage. The other cats, emboldened by Midnight's actions, fought with renewed vigor. The rival group, disorganized and facing unexpected resistance, began to falter. Brutus, seeing his advantage lost, let out a frustrated snarl. "This isn't over," he spat, before retreating with his injured group, leaving the cats of the old oak victorious, though a little battered. Silence descended upon the shelter, broken only by heavy breathing and the occasional triumphant hiss. Rusty, nursing a small scratch on his ear, looked at Midnight, his amber eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and profound respect. "Well, I'll be," he rumbled, a hint of awe in his voice. "The garden cat's got teeth after all." Luna approached Midnight, rubbing her head against his flank. "You fought well, Midnight," she purred, her approval clear. "You have the heart of a true leader." Midnight, still trembling slightly from the adrenaline, felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the cold. He had defended his family not just with strength, but with intelligence and courage. He had proven himself not just to the others, but to himself. In that moment, surrounded by his battered but victorious community, Midnight knew he was no longer just a member of the Pride. He was a leader ready to guide and protect his chosen family through whatever challenges lay ahead beyond the fence. The victory against Brutus and his gang solidified Midnight's place not just as a member, but as a respected leader within the community of the Old Oak. The shared danger, the collective defense of their sanctuary, had forged their bonds into something unbreakable, stronger than any fence. They were no longer just a group of cats. They were a family resilient and united. The winter deepened, bringing with it biting winds and heavy snowfalls that blanketed the city in a pristine yet unforgiving white. Life became a constant struggle for warmth and sustenance, but within the shelter, a vibrant, resilient spirit thrived. They shared their food, meager as it often was, ensuring no one went hungry. They huddled together for warmth, their purrs a collective symphony against the howling wind. Midnight found himself increasingly taking on responsibilities. He would organize scouting parties for food, using his keen senses to find overlooked scraps in the snow-covered streets. He developed new strategies for hunting, teaching the younger cats how to track faint scents beneath the snow and how to move silently across icy patches. His quiet authority was respected, his decisions trusted. Luna, with her hunting prowess, became his invaluable partner. Their combined skills a formidable force against the winter's scarcity. Old Man Tiber, while less active physically, offered counsel and historical knowledge, reminding them of past winters endured and overcome. Patches, with her endless energy, kept spirits high, her playful antics a welcome distraction from the harsh realities. Even Domino, the stoic, would occasionally offer a rare, approving headbutt to Midnight, a profound gesture of respect from the quiet Tom. Midnight found a profound satisfaction in this new role. It was challenging, demanding, and often exhausting, but it was also deeply fulfilling. He learned the nuances of leadership, when to be firm, when to be gentle, when to listen, and when to act decisively. He learned that true strength lay not just in physical prowess, but in wisdom, empathy, and the ability to inspire trust. His bond with Rusty deepened into a quiet, unwavering friendship. Rusty, who had initially been his gruff mentor, now saw Midnight as an equal, even a successor. They would often share the night watch, sitting side by side, their bodies pressed together for warmth, their eyes scanning the snow-laden landscape. Rusty would share stories of his own youth, of mistakes made and lessons learned, a testament to his trust in Midnight. One particularly cold morning, Midnight found a tiny, shivering kitten abandoned and alone near a frozen dumpster. Without hesitation, he scooped it up gently and brought it back to the shelter. The other cats immediately rallied, licking the kitten warm, sharing their meager food with it. Midnight watched, a surge of pride and warmth filling him. This was their community, a place of survival, yes, but also a place of compassion, of family. He had left behind a life of comfort, but he had found something far more precious, a purpose. A sense of belonging and a family forged not by blood, but by choice and by the shared journey beyond the fence. The winter, which had threatened to break them, had instead strengthened them, turning them into a resilient, loving unit, bound by the unyielding spirit of the wild. As winter slowly began to release its icy grip, giving way to the first tentative signs of spring, Midnight found himself venturing further on his foraging patrols. The snow began to melt, revealing the familiar contours of the city beneath, and the air, though still crisp, carried the faint, hopeful scent of thawing earth and nascent life. One afternoon, while tracking the scent of a discarded pastry, Midnight found himself in a part of the neighborhood he had visited since his very first days beyond the fence. It was a street of well-maintained houses, neatly manicured gardens, and the distant, muffled sounds of domesticity. A strange, familiar tug pulled at him, a subconscious recognition of something long past. He followed the invisible thread of memory, moving silently along the hedgerows until he stopped abruptly. There it was. Not just a similar garden, but his garden. The tall, weathered wooden fence, now slightly bleached by winter. The exact cluster of rosebush, their thorny branches still bare but promising future blooms. The bird bath, now filled with melting snow, reflecting the pale spring sky. It was Mrs. Gable's garden, his old kingdom. Midnight pressed himself against the familiar, rough texture of the fence, inhaling deeply. The scent of lavender, though faint after the winter, was still there, mingled with the unmistakable aroma of Mrs. Gable's special brand of cat food, a rich, meaty smell that instantly conjured images of brimming bowls and contented purrs. He peered through a small knothole in the fence, his emerald eyes scanning the familiar landscape. He saw the comfortable armchair in the conservatory, now bathed in a weak, watery sunlight. He saw the path leading to the back door, where he used to wait patiently for his morning entry. And then he saw her, Mrs. Gable. She was older, perhaps a little stooped, but still moving with that gentle, deliberate grace as she tidied a flower bed. Her silver hair, now almost entirely white, was pulled back in a neat bun. Her face, though lined with age, held the same soft, loving expression he remembered so vividly. She hummed a little tune, a familiar melody that sent a shiver of recognition down Midnight's spine, and then a flash of red. Eleanor, now a young woman, perhaps home from university, emerged from the back door, carrying a fresh bowl of food, the very salmon pate Midnight used to adore. She placed it carefully by the door, then called out, "Midnight? Dinner time, sweetie." Her voice, though matured, was still filled with the same affection, the same gentle coaxing. Midnight watched, utterly transfixed. He saw the full, untouched bowl of his favorite food, waiting patiently. He saw the warmth of the home, the loving presence of his humans, the absolute security of his old life. The comfort, the ease, the utter lack of struggle. It was all there, laid out before him, a tangible, beckoning reality. A profound internal conflict raged within him. His heart, now hardened by the streets, still recognized the deep, unwavering love of Mrs. Gable and Eleanor. He remembered the countless hours spent curled on their laps, the gentle strokes, the soft murmurs of affection. He remembered the feeling of being utterly safe, utterly cherished. The pang of longing was intense, a powerful ache that threatened to pull him back, to erase all the hardships, all the struggles, all the lessons of the past months. He could simply climb the fence, present himself at the back door, and his old life, with its endless comforts, would surely welcome him back. He imagined the warmth, the food, the effortless existence. It was a powerful, almost irresistible temptation. He stood there, poised between two worlds, the familiar scent of home mingling with the wild tang of the thawing earth, the gentle call of Mrs. Gable echoing with the memory of the howls of the wild. The fence, which he had once longed to cross, now stood as a silent, symbolic barrier, not just between two places, but between two versions of himself. His future, his very identity, hung in the balance, waiting for his choice. Midnight stood at the fence, frozen in a tableau of profound contemplation, suspended between two lives. The scent of salmon pate and lavender, the sound of Eleanor's loving call, the sight of Mrs. Gable's gentle hands, they were all powerful anchors, tugging at the deepest, most primal parts of his being. He imagined the warmth of the cushion in the conservatory, the endless supply of delicious food, the complete absence of danger. It was a life of pure, unadulterated comfort, a paradise for any cat. Yet, as he stared at the untouched bowl of food, a curious thought began to form. It was a full bowl, always full. It represented a life where sustenance was a given, never earned, never fought for. It was a life where he was provided for, protected, cherished, but also perhaps limited. He was a pet, a treasured possession, not a free agent. Then he remembered the biting wind of winter, the gnawing hunger, the terror of the dog chase. He remembered the feeling of his muscles straining as he scaled a wall, the exhilaration of a successful hunt, the sharp satisfaction of a hard-won meal. He remembered the quiet strength of Luna, the gruff wisdom of Rusty, the playful mischief of Patches. He remembered the shared warmth of huddled bodies in the shelter, the collective sigh of relief after a close call, the unwavering loyalty of his new family. He remembered the sense of purpose, of responsibility that had bloomed within him as he led the foraging parties, as he defended the shelter. He remembered the feeling of his own strength, his own cunning, his own resilience, qualities he had only discovered beyond the fence. He was no longer just Midnight, Mrs. Gable's cat. He was Midnight, leader of the Old Oak community, a survivor, a protector, a free spirit of the streets. The choice, when it finally coalesced in his mind, was not a rejection of love, but an affirmation of self. He loved Mrs. Gable and Eleanor deeply and truly. Their kindness had shaped his early life, providing him with a foundation of security and affection. But they had also inadvertently confined him. They had provided a gilded cage, however loving. His heart ached with a bittersweet tenderness as he thought of them. He knew they would miss him, perhaps always wonder what had become of their cherished Midnight. But he also knew that he could not go back. The world beyond the fence had changed him, forged him into a new being. He had tasted freedom, felt the raw, unfiltered pulse of life, and there was no turning back. He took one last long look at the garden, at the familiar back door, at the untouched food bowl. It was a poignant farewell, a silent acknowledgement of the beautiful life he was choosing to leave behind. He cherished the memories, the warmth, the love. But his path now lay elsewhere. With a deep, cleansing breath, Midnight turned away from the fence. He didn't look back. His steps were light, purposeful, imbued with a newfound clarity and resolve. He moved away from the residential street, back towards the familiar wilder scent of the thawing alleys, back towards the old oak, back towards his chosen family. The fence, once a symbol of an unreachable unknown, then a barrier to freedom, now stood as a reminder of the path he had traveled, and the profound, transformative choice he had made. He was no longer a cat defined by a boundary, but a cat defined by his own spirit. His own journey, his own wild, beautiful heart. His life beyond the fence was his, and he would live it with every fiber of his being, a testament to the power of choice and the enduring call of the wild. Years passed, marked by the changing seasons, the ebb and flow of street life, and the enduring resilience of the Old Oak community. Midnight, no longer the sleek, slightly timid newcomer, had become a legend in his own right. His fur was still a deep, lustrous black, but now bore the faint scars of countless skirmishes, each a testament to a life lived fully, fiercely, and freely. His emerald eyes, once wide with curiosity, now held the deep, knowing wisdom of a seasoned leader. He sat atop a high ivy-covered wall overlooking the city, the first blush of dawn painting the sky with hues of rose and gold. Beside him, a new generation of street cats, lean and eager, listened intently as he shared tales of survival, of cunning, and of the unwavering bonds forged in the wild. His voice, a low, resonant purr, carried the weight of experience, the calm authority of one who had seen it all. The Old Oak community thrived under his guidance. The shelter, once a mere refuge, had become a true home, a hub of activity and camaraderie. Midnight, with Luna by his side, had established clear territories, negotiated uneasy truces with rival groups, and ensured the survival and prosperity of his chosen family. He taught the young ones not just how to hunt, but how to be compassionate, how to share, how to rely on each other. Rusty, now truly an old man, would often watch Midnight with a quiet pride in his amber eyes. That garden cat, he'd sometimes grumble affectionately, turned out to be the best of us. Who'd have thought? He knew, as did all the others, that Midnight's journey had been unique, a bridge between two worlds. Midnight's story became a whispered legend among the street cats, the pampered pet who chose freedom, who learned the ways of the wild, and who rose to lead. It was a tale of courage, of transformation, and of the profound discovery of self beyond the confines of expectation. He had not just survived. He had flourished, creating a legacy that extended beyond his own lifetime. He often thought of Mrs. Gable and Eleanor, especially on quiet nights when the moon was full and the scent of distant roses carried on the breeze. There was no regret, only a deep, abiding gratitude for the love they had given him, a love that had allowed him to grow, to be strong enough to make his own choice. He carried their memory not as a burden, but as a cherished part of his own complex history. His life was a tapestry woven with the threads of comfort and wildness, of safety and adventure, of solitude and profound connection. He had found his true home not within four walls, but under the vast open sky, among the shadows and whispers of the city, with the beating heart of his chosen family. The sun rose higher, casting long golden streaks across the urban landscape. Midnight stretched, a picture of effortless grace and strength. His adventure was not over. It was an ongoing journey, a continuous discovery. He was Midnight, the midnight of the streets, and his whiskers, once twitching with tentative curiosity at a garden fence, now twitched with the confident knowledge of a life lived fully, freely, and with an open heart to the endless possibilities that lay beyond any boundary. His legacy was the enduring spirit of life beyond the fence, a testament to the wild, beautiful heart that beats within every creature, yearning for freedom and belonging.